In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord, may we be inspired by the example of the saints, especially Saint John Paul II. May we learn to proclaim what they believe and put their teaching into actions. And may our offering bring honor to your name. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. So it is a pleasure and an honor for me to be in Charlotte, describing and including you in a journey of what happened to me as a young son of immigrants that left Switzerland and arrived in Italy, where I was born. But before I'll clue you in my life, I would like to introduce you to the saint that I served, the saint that I had the honor and the privilege to spend daily time with him, the saint, the man that at a certain point in my journey, whatever he had, I had to have as well. So his name was Karol Józef Wojtyła. He was born on May 18, 1920, in a small village in Poland called Wadowice. He was baptized on June 20, and his early life, unfortunately, was marked by great losses. His mother, you probably already know this, but it's always good to repeat it, his mother died when Karol was 9 years old, and his older brother Edmund died when Karol was 12. He also had a sister named Olga, but she had died before Karol was born. And Karol's father died when Karol was 21 years old. So by the age of 21, he was alone on earth. As a young student, he was thrilled by literature, by the theater, and by the poetry. Working in a chemical plant surrounded and threatened by the Nazis' terror, he heard the voice of the Lord telling him, "Follow me." In this extraordinary setting, he began, guess what? To read books of philosophy and theology. And then he entered the clandestine seminary established by Cardinal Safieha. And after the war, he was able to complete his studies in the Faculty of Theology at the University of Krakow. How often in his letters to priests, to the youth, he has spoken about his priesthood, to which he was ordained on November 1st, 1946. In this text, Karol interprets his priesthood with particular reference to three saints of the Lord. The first one, and I quote, "You did not choose me, but I chose you." The second one, and I quote again, "The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep." And the third one, and I quote again, "As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you." In these three saints, we see the heart and the soul of our Holy Father. He really went everywhere, my dear friends, entirely in order to bear fruit that lasts. The Holy Father was a priest to the last because he offered his life to God for his flock and for the entire human family in a daily self-oblation for the service of the Church, especially amid the sufferings and his final months. And in this way, he became one with Christ, the Good Shepherd who loves his sheep. In July 1958, the young priest Karol began a new stage in his journey. Karol had gone to the Missouri Lakes for his usual vacation along with a group of young people who loved canoeing. But he brought with him a letter inviting him to call on the Primate of Poland, Cardinal Wyszynski. He could guess the purpose of the meeting. He was to be appointed as the auxiliary bishop of Krakow at the age of 38. Leaving the academic world, leaving this challenging engagement with young people, leaving the great intellectual endeavor of striving to understand and interpret the mystery of that creature, which is man, and of communicating to today's world the Christian interpretation of our being. All this must have seemed to him like losing his very self, losing what had become the very human identity of this young man, this young priest. But guess what? He chose to serve the Lord. He accepted the appointment, for he heard in the church call the voice of Christ. In October 1978, Karol Wojtyła once again heard the voice of the Lord. Karol, do you love me? And the Archbishop of Krakow at that time answered from the depths of his heart, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. The love of Christ was the dominant force in the life of our beloved Holy Father, Saint John Paul II. Anyone who ever saw him pray in real life or on a TV screen, whoever heard him preach, knows about that love. Saint John Paul II was a man of prayer. The center of his life was founded on the Eucharist. That's why he belongs here with you today. His deep faith, his confidence in God's help in the crucial events of life, as well as the total surrender in the maternal help of the Blessed Virgin Mary, which manifested itself with the particular intensity in moments of obscurity, as that of the tragic attack of 1981. All of those manifestations show his confidence in God's help. He always gave thanks and attributed to God every merit and every good gift received. My dear friends, being a pope is not your average job. It's actually not technically a job. It's a vocation. You don't just decide to become a pope. You don't go around putting your name in people's yard, vote for me. You are called to do it. Nor, and you have to believe me in this, being pope is an easy position. No cardinal that I know buys a one-way ticket before a conclave. The world, think about that, the world closely watches and analyzes every move the Pope makes, every word the Pope speaks. Everyone judges the Pope based on his or her own perspective and agenda. Standing in the fisherman's shoes, my dear friends, is all-consuming. My sense, my personal sense for having lived in the Vatican and of the cardinals who I met is that no one of them actually wants to become Pope. No one. It is certainly much easier to be a cardinal than it is to be a Pope. A friend, while I was in service, explained to me as a young Swiss guard that one of the reasons why Pope changes their name when assuming their ministry is that their previous life is over. As Jesus told Peter in John chapter 21, verses 18, and I quote, "will be taken where he does not wish to go." End of the quote. My experience of the pontificate of St. John Paul II reinforces that insight. But let me tell you how you ended up joining the Swiss Guards. Yes, first and foremost, you have to be Swiss. Otherwise, you there could be Swiss Guard as well. And my dad is Swiss, my mom is Italian, and my dad was living in Italy when met this wonderful woman in the early 60s, fell in love, got married, and I was born. I was born in a little village in the northern part of Italy. The name of the little village is Sotto il Monte. Guess who was born in Sotto il Monte? Saint Pope John the 23rd. Same village as I was. So growing up, my dear friends, I went to the Papa Giovanni school. I lived on the Papa Giovanni street. My favorite sandwich was Papa Giovanni panino. Everything was Papa Giovanni. I even dated one of his niece, for crying out loud. But guess my joy in 2014 when Pope Francis canonized on the same day the man that I served and the man that came from my village, St. John Paul II and St. John the 23rd, on the same day. Well, I was an only child. And definitely, if you ask my mother, she will tell you that I was not a phlegmatic, melancholic kind of guy. Rather, a choleric and sanguine kind of guy. I was always constantly in trouble. And having the Swiss citizenship, but Italian blood, I felt that I was invincible, because the Swiss are so precise and the Italian are so creative that I have the two main components to be successful: precision and creativity. But when I finished graduate school, when I finished the university, I had only one goal in life at that time. And that goal was to live at home until I was 38. Because that's what you do in Italy. Why should you leave home, for crying out loud? Your mom does the laundry, cooks the meal. Your dad allows you to drive his car. He pays for the gas, the insurance. They don't ask for any contribution on utilities. Why do you want to leave? That's the paradise. But my dad, Swiss, didn't really agree with me. And so he comes to me at the end of graduate school without even 20 minutes after the celebration. And he says, I'm going to give you a couple of weeks to make up your mind what you want to do in life. And if you don't know what you're going to do, I am going to tell you what you're going to do. And so I decided, as a young Italian dude of those times, okay, living in Milano, surrounded by beauty, by any kind of vices. I was an handsome man, long hair, I was thinner, I was a killer, as we will say. I decided to challenge my father and wait 2 weeks. At the end of which, my father precisely comes and says, 54 weeks military boot camps with the Italian army, 17 weeks military boot camp with the Swiss army. Keep in mind, whichever army you choose, you lose the citizenship. Opposite. So I thought for a second, 54 weeks Italian army. I grow up in Italy, I think as an Italian, I wear clothes as an Italian, I eat as an Italian. 17 weeks in the Switzerland, I only have a passport, I have a watch, I love chocolate. I'm gonna go with the 17 weeks, Dad. I am gonna join the Swiss army. When I said that, I noticed, and that's a picture in my soul, I know that the corner of my father's mouth go up a little, like that smile, I got you. And guess what? The Swiss army has a navy, for crying out loud. There is no ocean in Switzerland, and they have a navy. So I arrived in Switzerland. They put me in a bunker inside a mountain on a room that was 12 by 14, 36 men in that room on triple bunk beds. I basically spent 17 weeks in an MRI. I couldn't turn left or right. But when I was at the army and I started losing weight, I needed a way out. I needed a way out. I was born Catholic, baptized Catholic. I was a lukewarm Catholic, but I needed a way out. And so I went back to my lukewarm Catholic and I said to my lieutenant, I have to go to Mass. I've missed Sunday Mass for the past 6 weeks. If my mom finds out, she's going to come up here. We are all going to be in trouble. And the lieutenant says, well, this Sunday, 7 o'clock, have your uniform to go outside, clean, propped. Somebody will be here to take you to Mass. We were in the Swiss Alps. I knew that the closest church was going to be about an hour away. So I prepared myself, and I had the most important thing, a $20 bill, a 20 Swiss franc bill to give to the driver so that he will drop me where I wanted. But with much surprise, in the morning, I am there, I'm waiting for a soldier to arrive, and a major shows up. And my brain right away said this to me, this is gonna cost you more than 20 bucks. And on my way down to the church, I was trying to find a way to get out of that situation. And instead, this major drove me to a church, St. Martin de Tours, asked me to follow him into the sacristy, and all of a sudden he started taking his uniform off, and he started dressing as a priest. And I thought, who the heck is this guy? Well, he was the chaplain. I didn't read the things correctly. He was a major, but also a chaplain. And so instead of being in the city drinking beer and trying to have a nice time, I ended up being the lecturer, being the altar server. They had 40-hour devotion adoration started after Mass. I had to sing the Salutaris Hostia in Latin. I had the incense. I did it all. On my way back, no beer, nothing, this major says to me, Mario, I surely think you need to join the Swiss Guards. And I said, join the Swiss Guard? I don't really see myself standing still without moving, dressed in a funny costume under the sun. My back is gonna hurt, my feet are gonna hurt, I don't think I can do that. But the major says, well, you know what, Mario? I think that you should pray. You should pray because I do believe that you belong there. And I did. And at the end of the 17 weeks boot camps, I went back home. And when my father came and said, I am going to give you 2 weeks to figure out, I said, time out, Dad. Time out. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to join the Swiss Guards. And so my mom, who was in the kitchen making the tagliatelle, okay, she came out from the kitchen and said to me, oh, really? You are going to go and work in the Vatican. Can you tell me the name of the current Pope? So I arrived at the Vatican as a young Swiss Guard with a largely secular understanding of Catholicism, which by now you understand was my parents' fate, but not truly my own. This outsider view was both helpful and deceiving. In fact, I was able to meet St. John Paul II without any preconceived notion. His impression on me was not filtered through my perception of his office, but purely based on a human level. The first time I met St. John Paul II, I was about a month into the service. I had seen him from far away, but never had a chance to exchange few words with him. And usually the colonel introduces the new recruits to the Holy Father. But because that was around Christmas and a lot of work was going on, we did not have that opportunity yet. And so there I was outside of the Pope apartment, and the cardinal arrives. We start talking, and I introduce myself, and all of a sudden, track, the door of the apartment open. The Holy Father is right there. I go in my attention, and the cardinal says to the Holy Father, Santità, this is a new guard. And so the Holy Father came out, passed through the door, came to me, and I knew because I was trained, I had to get off my attention and go and shake his hand. And I shook his hand, and he looked me straight in my eyes, and he says, thank you for giving up your life for the church. And then he left. And I stood there and I thought, wait a second, maybe here I chose the wrong job here. They already shot the guy once. They are going to, wait a second, giving up my life for the church? What does this mean? Well, in the Vatican, my dear friends, the Swiss Guard, guess what, are a symbol of fidelity. For more than 500 years, to be precise, since 1506, the Sons of Switzerland have served the church by protecting the Supreme Pontiff in good times and in bad times. Under the blood of 147 guards who sacrificed their lives protecting Pope Julius II from the invading Landsknecht barbarians during the sack of Rome in 1527, this military corps continues the noble of service as Defensores Libertatis Ecclesia, protectors of the freedom of the church. St. John Paul II told once to his secretary in front of me that he had been inspired by God to change the way he led the church. He said, I must lead the church with suffering. The Pope must suffer so that every family and the world should see that there is a higher gospel. The gospel of suffering with which one must prepare the future. And let me tell you with an anecdote how I knew that what I had heard was exactly what he meant. He had just received surgery from a benign cancer he had in his colon, and he was coming back from the hospital, and I was with my uniform where the elevator was. And he arrived, and the Holy Father had this antique Mercedes, and when the driver stopped right 3 feet from where I was, next to the elevator, the butler, the personal aide that every pope has, came out of the car and opened the door so that the Holy Father would step out. He was really pale. He had lost weight. He looked weak. And so the Holy Father puts his right foot out, puts his left foot out, and he pushes himself out of the car. Then he moves, and because he shook for a moment, he put his left hand now on the side of the car at the same time that the butler closed the door of the Mercedes, causing the little pinky of the Holy Father to be closed into the door, right in front of me. And when that happened, the Holy Father only made a sound. He didn't say a word in Polish or in Latin or in any of the languages that he spoke. He only made a sound. The butler realized, reopened the door, but he kept that suffering in his heart. He didn't judge, he didn't blame, he didn't accuse, he didn't pay attention. His pinky was definitely messed up because he was bleeding, and the next day I called my mom and I said, look at the Angelus on the TV, because the Holy Father left pinky will have a huge bandage on for a little accident that occurred. So he, at the same time, demonstrated to us, Swiss Guard, his gratitude for our Petrine service, that is the service to the successor of Peter. And despite being in many situations where you don't talk, you don't move, you are just in his presence, sometimes he even showed his gratitude to the point to joking around with us. Well, the Pope butler, whose name was Angelo, had 2 girls, 2 daughters, Emanuela and Raffaella. And Angelo really wanted me to go out with either or. But I wasn't interested in either or. And so there was this little joke between me and Angelo. Okay, so would you want to go out? I don't want to go. There was that little game going on. Well, the game went a little bit too long, because here we are, Wednesday, general audience, Aula Paolo VI. If you look at the Basilica on the left side, at the end of the general audience, when I was outside, at that point to do the military, he was going to pass. I was controlling, making sure that nobody was right there. I hear the organ, I hear the walk, I hear the noise, so I see it, I go in my military position, and all of a sudden, from the corner of my eyes, I see Angelo arriving, which means the Holy Father is about 3 to 5 feet behind him. And Angelo sees me, and so what does Angelo do to Mario? He elbows me with all of his strength, with his left elbow, pump, right under my sternum, that caused me to go down exactly at the same time that the Holy Father was in my line. And then I came up, and I was definitely blowing up, trying to contain a cough. The Holy Father stops, turns, sees me, immediately recognizes me, and says, Mario, there is no need to bow. During his pontificate, my dear friend, we had an extraordinary example of human greatness. First, with his apostolic vigor, and then through his witness of faithfulness. Even in his suffering and sickness, he pointed the way for me to an authentic human growth, fully human, a growth which was not only cultural, but also economic, a growth nourished by spiritual food. He was a very special person, gifted with an enormous ability to communicate and with a brilliant intellect. Those of us who had daily contact with him were always struck by the richness of his intuition, the depth of his spirituality, the example of his prayerfulness, and his immense humility, which was rooted in his intimate union with Christ. It was his humility which permitted him to continue to guide the church and to give an eloquent message even when his physical strength was failing him. One day I was alone in the Apostolic Palace. I was tired. I had no break for many, many days. I was looking for free time. And all of a sudden they call me and they say, the Only Father is coming. Close, secure the floor. And so you close all the doors. You make sure that you tell the employees, don't come out. The Only Father is walking by. And the Only Father shuffled. The Only Father shuffled. He didn't move clack, clack, clack. He moved shh, 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 shh. We learned later that that's a sign of Parkinson, okay? Who has Parkinson's have trouble lifting their feet, okay? And so for us as Swiss Guard, the intensity of the sound corresponded to how far he was, how close he was arriving to, okay? So that specific day, because I was tired, I was hot, I was sad, I wanted him to make me present, feel alive. I wanted him to touch me. I wanted him to just stop and wink at me. I just wanted him to say, ciao, come stai? And so here the noise comes, everything is secure, I go into my position, and all of a sudden the noise increases. I'm up there, the Only Father passes, he had two priests with him, and the Only Father goes away. He didn't stop, and I felt nausea. I felt so sad that I remained in my position. I closed my eyes, and when I opened my eyes, the Only Father was right in front of me. I didn't hear any shh, 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 nothing. He was in front of me, and he caught me off guard because I was coming down. So he went back up there, and he put his hand into his pocket, and he pulled this rosary out of his pocket, and he said, Mario, the rosary is my favorite prayer. Marvelous in its simplicity and authenticity. Make this your most powerful weapon. And he gave it to me, and I put it in my pocket, and since that day, I carry it with me, because guess what? This is my most powerful weapon. Even though I was carrying weapon as a Swiss Guard, this is my most powerful weapon. Call on Mary. Many times St. John Paul II would say, call on Mary. She's the Queen of Peace. So when your soul or your family are troubled or things go wrong at work, cry out to her without ceasing. Have you at least tried it, my dear friends, when you have lost your calm? You will be surprised as its immediate effect. Be daring in your praying, and the Lord will turn you from a pessimist into an optimist, from being timid to being daring, from being feeble-spirited to being a man of faith. The long St. John Paul II prayed, the more absorbed in prayer he became, until he seemed completely taken up in it, as if nothing and no one in the room could pull him back from the place he had gone. Castel Gandolfo, summer residence. I am there, it's the afternoon, the doors are closed, everything is taking the siesta. Very important in Rome, like in South or Central America, the siesta. And so, all of a sudden, they knock at the door, and I go, and there was this UPS guy with this envelope, and I said, okay. And nobody was around. All the workers, well, doing the siesta, because as Pope John the 23rd, once he was asked, how many people work in the Vatican? And he answered, about half. So I was there, I had that package, and even though it was not my responsibility to take it upstairs, it was 3 in the afternoon, and I said, you know what? The Holy Father is probably out in the garden reading. Nobody's in the apartment. I'm just going to go up. And it was for his secretary, Monsignor, at that time, Stanislaw Dziwisz. And so there I am with my uniform, the sword, thinking that nobody is in the apartment, okay? I walk down the hallway, very narrow, and every morning we had Mass with the Holy Father, so I knew exactly where the chapel was on my left. And so, naturally, when I arrived in the proximity of the chapel, I slowed down because I wanted to bow. And when I slowed down and I turned, guess what I saw? The Holy Father kneeling on the floor next to the kneeler with the wonderful red velvet pillow. He was kneeling next to it. And his right hand was grabbing the altar, the granite of the altar, and his forehead was against the back of his right hand. When I saw that, I felt the bone marrow go up and down my spine. I took 2 steps back. I went into the office, put down that package that I had, and I went back downstairs to guard the entrance. That scene really confused me. There were no camera. It was 3 in the afternoon. It's hot. There's no air conditioning. It's July. It's humid. What is he doing? That same day in the evening, I was in service somewhere else. It's a more friendly service being in Castel Gandolfo because there is no protocol. It's very intimate, okay? And the Holy Father walks by, sees me, comes toward me, looks me in the eyes. By the way, St. John Paul II, blue eyes, it's a color I did not find yet in any person. He looked me in the eyes and said to me, why don't you join me next time? I was completely blown away. I didn't really understand what he had meant to me up until that time. But because he told me once to not let my life be barren, but he told myself to be useful, to make yourself felt, because he told me that to shine forth with the torch of my faith and of my love, I realized that to do all of that, it demands sacrifice. It demands self-denials. But that moment when I saw that, I realized how pleasant that sacrifice can turn out to be. And so here I am telling all of you, my dear friends, persevere in your faith. Do not be afraid ever to show your faith. A number of times, as I said, I personally witnessed the Holy Father demonstrate that true joy is not a mere passing emotion, but comes from having met Jesus, who is true joy and true love. It was through St. John Paul II witness that I was continually exhorted to serve others as Christ did. He who himself came not to be served, but to serve. As a Swiss Guard, I had the pleasure to meet also another saint, Mother Teresa. And let me tell you a couple of episodes so that you can understand how saints are. The first time I met Mother, she was in a group of 20. And you have to know, even though some of them are here and they know exactly what I'm talking about, when the nuns move, they're like bees. They move in flock, okay? They're all together and they can be mean against the Swiss Guard because they want to get to the front of the line. They're going to get to the front of the line. They always have the umbrella. They're all 4 feet tall. Pum, pum, pum. And all of a sudden, they're in the front of the line. So I was always very intimidated by the sister, especially by the sister of Mother Teresa, because they all look alike. You cannot identify them. Sorry, sisters. So the first time I met Mother Teresa, she had arrived, they went in, and then all of them came out except Mother. And Mother stayed in for another hour or so, but one of the sisters came and gave me a plastic bag, and she said, "Can you please give this to Mother when she comes out?" And absolutely, that's what I'm there for, right? Okay, so I grabbed the bag, I put it on the floor. About an hour later, Mother comes out, and she comes, she walks away, and I remembered about the bag, and so I went to her and I said, Mother, and she stopped and said, "They left this bag for you." She grabbed the bag, she immediately put the bag on the floor, and then she moved her sahari, her habit, you know where the blue stripes are, she moved it, and she had a pin there, and on that pin she had a miracle medal pinned on. So she opened the pin, she took the miracle medal, she closed the pin, re-put the sari down, grabbed my right hand and put the medal in my hand, closed it, bent down, picked up the bag, and left. I lost that medal. I put it in my pocket, lost it. 6 months later, almost to the clock. This time, she was in a small group. One was Sister Nirmala, which was her successor, and a few others. So they all come. At this time, the meeting is much shorter. They all go in. They all come out. I'm just in the corner. I don't have to do the military salute because they're not priests. So I'm just right there. They walk away, and all of a sudden, one of them stops, turns around, and comes toward me. And sure enough, that was Mother Teresa. And I am looking at Mother. Mother looks at me, smiles. She moves her habit. There was a pin there. She opened it. She took that miracle medal. She closed. She refixed her habit. She grabbed my right hand. She put the medal in my right hand. She closed my right hand. And then she looked up, and in English, she said to me, "This time, don't lose it." Talking about saints. An expression, in conclusion, because I have a big clock here that is telling me that I have to stop. Even though I know you would like me to keep going, but. An expression, 2 more thoughts. An expression I heard many times St. John Paul II, be more. He never said get more, do more. He always said be more. What I, Mario Enzler, what I took from his teaching was to rediscover the beauty and the power of my own charism remembering that no gift given is meant for oneself, but it is given for the good of the church and for the good of the church's mission. In taking up the call to a new evangelization, a call near and dear to John Paul II's heart, we all here at the Eucharistic Congress, we all must receive this condition of self-giving as absolutely essential so that we don't fall into the error of using the truth with which the Holy Spirit enlives the church. You know, one day I had to bring something to the Holy Father, so I entered a room and the Holy Father was writing. And he was writing with this beautiful Mont Blanc. I love Mont Blanc. Wives, when is your husband's birthday? Buy him a Mont Blanc. He deserves one. He wants to hold one in his hands. A Mont Blanc is the queen of the pens, okay? And St. John Paul II loved this. He carried it everywhere. An old one, the one that you still had to suck up the ink, okay? And he was writing, and he had a beautiful calligraphy, like a third-grade elementary teacher. He was amazing. And there I am, waiting for him to pay attention to me, but he wasn't. And all of a sudden, I realized that he had under his left hand, he has a book. And so I did 1 + 1. He's writing something regarding that book that he has under his left hand. And since I'm trying to learn on the job, since I'm trying to take everything that he has so that I can become like him, I need to know what book he's writing about. And so there I am, it's not that you can go, excuse me, what is the book? You have to be discreet, okay? And so you become like a little ostrich, your neck goes long, and you try to look, okay? So you go 1, you go 2, Tolstoy. And I'm thinking, Tolstoy? For crying out loud, Tolstoy book, are all this big? How is it possible that that's a book of... Wait a second. Does the Holy Father read Spark Notes? Hi, that's awesome. Is he reading Spark Notes? I don't think so. So let me just go again. And so I went again, and this time I realized the death of Ivan Illich. 76 page, my dear friends. $4.99 on Amazon. You should all get it tonight. It's the last masterpiece of Tolstoy. It's the coming into the fate of Tolstoy, the crossing the Tiber, as I say. And so I didn't have Amazon at that time. I ended up going to the Libreria Vaticana, and I bought that book, and I read that book. And because it was a little bit hard for me to understand, I kept it with me so that I will pick it up and read few passages here and there. And one day, obviously, I had the book with me when I was called that the Holy Father was coming by, and I put the book on the mensola where the window is, and the Holy Father came by, and he stopped, as I said, "How, Mario, how are you? Did the soccer team that you like win or not won?" And then he saw that book, and he picked up the book. And obviously he didn't think to connect the dots that I had bought that book because I saw that book. But when he grabbed the book in his hands, he said, "Mario, this book is about many things. It's about the terrible weak spots of our human heart. It's about the primacy of death. But more than anything, is about the consequences of living without truth. Without truth and without an abiding connections with one's life. Be always for the whole truth, Mario, even when it hurts." And then he put the book down, and I still have that book. So, in conclusion, John Paul II, St. John Paul II, impacted my young life in profound ways. laying the groundwork for my becoming a husband, a father, a businessman, a professor, but most important, a practicing Catholic. It was his example that inspired me, his words that gave me hope, and his ideas that provided direction to my life. So, my dear friends, the next time you feel lost, the next time you are lost, do not be afraid. Go to him, and he will show you the way. Thank you very much, and God bless you.